Lesson 6, Using my network module. This lesson will focus on the functions provided by the network module, their purposes, and how to implement them with clear examples for both the client and server. First of all, this network module is to replace the remote functions, remote events, and a new thing we'll be learning about, which is unreliable events. First of all, the network module utilizes bind functions, which is this function exactly. So what this does is it binds the remote functions. So this technically is a remote function that is listening for when it's fired. Then there's bind events, which is basically a remote event, which is listening for when it's fired. So bind functions on the server or client are to handle remote function calls. Uh, on the server side, it handles requests sent from the client via invoke server, and on the client side, it handles requests sent from the server via invoke client. So this is a server script, and I'm binding the function like this. So this is a remote function that's waiting and listening. And on the client side, you can also do the same. You can bind either events or functions just like you can on the server. Same for events. Bind events on the server or client to handle remote event communication. For the server side, it handles events fired from the client, and for the client side, it handles events fired from the server. The purpose for firing server and firing client. So right here, as you know, firing client is to fire it to the client, obviously, and over here to fire the server is to fire it to the server. Then we have fire all clients, which is basically to send it to every single client there is. Then we also have another one that's fire other clients, which that one's not as important, but it basically only excludes one specified player and sends it to all the other ones. And then we have fire clients within distance, which basically you give the position, the distance radius of how far you want it to fire to clients within that distance, and it fires to all those clients in that distance. Then we have the invoke. We can either invoke on the server or invoke client. It's all the same. Then we have the new remote events, which is called unreliable events. So unreliable events is what they do is when you're firing events really fast at a very fast pace, like 60 times a second per se, that puts stress on the server. So you use unreliable events so that it doesn't put as much stress, but sometimes the calls will miss. So like sometimes it won't fire. So this is for very fast processing from server to client or from client to server. And this is basically to reduce the performance that it, or to reduce the basically the power it has on the server so that it performs better, you know. So you can do fire client unreliable. You can do fire all clients reliable. It's basically the same. You can have all the parameters that the regular clients is. So you can fire client unreliable, fire all client unreliable. You can fire all client within distance unreliable. So you have all the same fires, but you have it as unreliable as well. So the unreliable is only for events, not functions, by the way. So first, our first example is going to be this bind functions for this network. And you can see right here, we're firing, invoking the server with that function. And we're basically sending it multiply numbers. So you have to, when you're firing to the server or to the client, when you're firing it, you first have to put in the event name. So this is the event name, as you can see right here. This is the event name, and this is the name. So you have to fire it to that, and then you give the other parameters. Okay? Same with the server. If I'm firing to the server, right? Firing to the server, send the player, then the event name. As you can see, the event name is right here. And then that's how it knows what event to fire it to. So for our first example, we're binding function multiply numbers, and then on the client, we're invoking that server with that specified remote function multiply numbers, And so if we were to run this, let me tag out all this real quick. So if we're to run this, if I join the game, it should invoke the server 5 times 10, and it should print out 50. So here's our input. Gonna run. And by the way, you can see the network always prints out what is being created and binded. So as you can see, it says the server was invoked, and then it got the result from the print statement, which was 50. So the network will always print out what remote events and what events are being created, when they're binded, when they're created for the. So this is creating the folder. So it creates an automatic folder for all of the remote events and functions in here, and then it binds the function and creates the function or event if it was an event, and then when we fire it, it lets us know when we fire it, and then it prints out the result from the client. So that's functions, that's remote functions. Next, we're gonna have bind events. So if I tag out this now, and now we have bind events. As you can see, I'm binding the event called player message, and here on the server, I'm going to fire the server to the player message, and it's going to say hello server. So the server will say Zenith says hello server. So if I play it, you'll see it'll create the folder first, and then it'll bind the event, create the event. So create the folder, create the event, and now it's going to fire the event, and boom, it says Zenith says hello. So as you can see, it says reliable. So this is a reliable event. It also creates unreliable underneath, just in case, for if you want to switch to unreliable. But so it's currently reliable, so that means it will fire it every single time. Now, the next example, we're going to do firing to the client. So if I tag this out, here, whenever the player joins, it's going to fire to the client. We actually want to wait for the player to be added. So we're going to do player.character added wait. And then right here with the bind events, another thing you need to know is you can bind multiple events. So as you can see, I'm binding 1, 2, 3, 4 events. You can do that with the functions too. So now now we're going to wait for the character to be made, and then we're going to fire the client with that character. As you can see, it creates the remote folder. Then it binds it, creates it, and now it prints the message sent from the server. So the server sent to the player with the event welcome message, with the print statement welcome to the game, and the client heard it and printed it. Next, we have fire all clients, which is going to be fire all clients is going to be this one right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this manually. So I'll show you guys how to run code manually. So I'm going to basically, when I'm going to fire this server, it's going to fire it to the broadcast event, and it's going to say a new round has started, and it's going to print that message. So if I load this game, so it's waiting for it to be created right now. So if I go into the server and I run this command, it's going to fire to the server, and as you can see, it printed a broadcast, a new round has started. So I just fired that to all clients. So in fact, we can even test it out if we do like a 2-player. So we'll do a 2-player. And you'll see it'll fire to all clients, and each client will print that. So this is the server. These are the 2 clients loading up. So I'm gonna wait for them to load in. Okay, now that they're loaded in, I'm gonna run the command. Alright, fire to all clients. And now if we look at the clients, open the output, you can see this one, a new round has started. Now if I go to this one, a new round has started. So it fires it to all clients. Alright. Next, we have fire all clients within distance. So this is going to be this one. We're going to do maybe like a 10 distance instead of 50 so I can show you guys. So I'm going to run this one manually as well. We already have the event binded over here, which is the nearby message. So if I run this, just waiting for me to load up. So since I'm within the distance of the 000, when I fire it to the client, you see it prints you are near the target. Now if I move away, and I fire it again, you see it fires, but it doesn't print it because they're not within the distance, as you can see right here. So that's how you use the fire within distance. Next, we're going to do unreliable events. For the unreliable event, it's basically the same as regular events. You usually only use this for when you're firing it very fast, but if you're not firing it very fast, it also still works just the same. So for unreliable events, you actually have to keep it outside of, it's a different bind, so it's actually bind unreliable events. So that's how you do this one. Yeah, so they're separate. So bind events is separate from bind unreliable events. That's the same for the server too. So that's why I didn't fire it, because it didn't exist. So now if we try again, just got it a little bit confused, but there we go. It fires the unreliable event to the client. The client hears it, and this one you can basically just send as fast as you want, and the performance on the server is going to be a lot better than if you do it with a regular event. And so that's basically how you use this network module. Now it's going to be time for an activity.